So let's talk a little bit more about this boys and girls difference. Do you see this in children? Do you see that young boys are advised to not think about emotions or not express emotions?
Not in the schools, but of course at homes.
Yes.
It is that
Yes.
the boys don't cry. And another, stigma, anything you choose for a girl has to be pink, anything for a boy, it has to be blue, be the decor of the room or the dress or anything. So one of my friends, she has a boy, said, why this stigma? So for whenever she chooses, for the boy she chooses pink. It was समझ में ही वही pink आता है. So of course, homes still we feel that this.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes,
this,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's a homes thing.
Yeah, not in the school. Not in the school.
schools. But you must be seeing the outcomes of this in schools, where in terms of how boys are able to express emotions, understand their own emotions, and deal with conflict, as opposed to girls.
Up to kindergarten and I think primary also, the girls, they are expressive.
Yeah.
But of course, when they enter into the adolescence age, they reserve their own, emotions.
Yeah.
And of course, we do observe that conflict. And this is how, we are observing the concerns amongst the adolescence age comparatively more, because they are not in a position to express their emotions. Or maybe they are not in a position to identify their emotions.
Yeah.
Okay. So we were discussing that there is a need for this happiness and well-being to talk about. So do you think school places importance on well-being or as compared to academics?
I don't say that the schools are paying more importance on the well-being than academics, but of course up to primary level equal importance is given, and it depletes as we move to the middle department or the secondary, because here the academics takes a higher role. So I don't feel that it is given more importance.
So as an educationist, would you like something in your school where such program being implemented on focused on well-being and something?
Of course, when we talk about the program, there should be some program, but that should not be an additional thing besides all that which they are doing. If we can design something which is being in sync with any of the scholastic subjects or in sync with any of the co-scholastic subject, maybe music, art, dance, etc., then the parents will accept it happily, the students will accept it happily, even the management, anything which is being taken, where is the time? Everybody is, have that pinch of scarcity of time. If it is being clubbed with, we need to design something that this type of life skill, emotional management, happiness, mindfulness, it should be clubbed with any of the scholastic or co-scholastic subjects.
That's very interesting. Time is always a constraint, isn't it, in today's busy world? One of the good things about this research is that there's a lot of good evidence now that students who have undergone mindfulness and emotional intelligence programs, they actually become better at academics. So, and the pathway for that is quite obvious. So mindfulness improves your attention and concentration. And just like it allows you to become more attentive of your own emotions and feel them better, you're actually able to concentrate better in studies. So, earlier with older, more comprehensive, more onerous social emotional learning programs, I think this used to be a constraint. The more recent mindfulness programs don't take more than 10-15 minutes a day. That's probably spread out over 2-3 different slots. And most teachers who have experienced them, they report that that 5 minutes that I spend in the morning, it's well worth it because I save more time, because students are much more attentive and calmer and able to relax. I mean, one of the things about the positive psychology phenomena is that even difficulties are essentially viewed as a lack of ability. So, if a child, for example, is a bit restless and is not able to sit in one place, and feels the need to get up and move around quite a lot. So one way to approach such a child is one way to approach such a child is to see that this child is not interested, or they don't feel like studying. But essentially all that they have is that they have a reduced ability to sit in one place, which is natural because children are different and all of them grow slightly differently. So mindfulness, social emotional learning is all about identifying these difficulties that students have. So if somebody is losing their temper, if there's a child who is being very angry, then this is somebody who is not able to identify and manage their anger. And that's the area that they need to build a bit more skill in, or a bit more strength in.
I believe the families, they have great role in that, because preparing the children to be emotionally more smart and strong, we can always club it with our lessons, as he rightly said, that 5 minutes before the lesson makes the learning more impactful. Homes, they have this environment. I just got to know that one of the school has started the silence period after every two periods. It's a 2-minute silence period. One of the school has started with the kindergarten children the Om chanting, and I was in fact I'm referring to my own granddaughter. She was saying, let's do Om chanting. After that, she said, rub your hand, feel the heat, and bring it to your eyes, and then through neck, and then ab, and then legs, and then slowly open your eyes. So we never taught her. So schools are doing effort, which I picked up and I shared it with the teachers, and they also realized that things, this is not a structured thing. This is something we picked up from somewhere. So homes need to be.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. For example, with my children's school, they did try to experiment with mindfulness, and I think for 2-3 months they would have a 20-minute mindfulness session with the primary school, and the kids enjoyed it. The teachers were also seeing the benefits of it. But like you said, with the academic curriculum being so heavy and being prioritized in school, they sort of let that lapse. At home, in fact, Soumya, I've come to you with to seek help, where I experienced a situation where my son was expressing a lot of anger, and it got to a stage where in school there was inappropriate behavior, and of course we tried to go to the root of things. It wasn't a situation we could solve for him, so he had to hold that anger. He did have to hold that anger. And so we actually, it was the principal, when we were discussing with her that we are seeing a big change in my child, I'm feeling helpless, what is it that I can do to support him, because I can't change his circumstances, he has to deal with that external stimulus that's provoking that anger. And she's the one who suggested mindfulness to me for the first time, which is when I became aware of it as a concept. And then I had come to you for one of your workshops, and brought my son for that. And I think what it did was just immediately, first of all, as a parent, I felt that there is something I can do. It's not, I'm not helpless. There is some support that I can provide my child. The second thing that it did was it allowed my child to sit and hold his anger and be okay with his anger. Before that intervention, he did not know what to do with that anger, which is why it was being expressed in inappropriate ways. And I think as a family, we sort of started a small journey where I also became aware of it, he also became aware of it. Together, you know, we were almost like a short journey that we undertook. And I think it's a little bit of, you know, the school wants parents to do it and parents want school to do it, because I did try and do it in the summer holidays with both my children. We would just sit down for 10 minutes every day. And in the summer holidays, I was able to sustain that structure and you know, momentum and periodicity. But once school starts, you know, everything is just all over the place. The schedule is so busy, and I would love for it if it would happen in school instead. But yeah, between school and parents, I think together we do need to provide support, because I just think it's so unfair for a child to be helplessly dealing with his emotions when there are so many adults around to support him. We just need to know what to do, how to help that child, so that they don't feel that they are alone, or that their behavior is shameful and that they are doing something wrong. It's a natural emotion that they're experiencing, and we as the support structure of adults around them need to collaborate in ways in which we can help that child.
So what I have gathered from your discussion is that one is for the time being, like how to structure it in the school system, basically how to bring mindfulness in the school. So what research suggests and what we also implement is that doing maybe, you know, 1 or 2 minutes of practice in the beginning of the lesson at 3 transition point. It's very helpful, like beginning of the day, like when you start the first lesson, then after lunch break or refreshment, and at the closure of the day. So that these are the 3 transition points. If the teacher is, you know, implementing mindfulness and doing it for 1 or 2 minutes, that create a space where the child is able to settle down or become aware about what's happening around him in the surrounding environment or in the classroom environment, and then becoming aware about his own self also. So that synchronization is very important about what you are doing and what's happening within you. That's what mindfulness does basically. So these are the 3 transition points where, like, you need not to have like 30 minutes of lesson. Taking out the time, you can actually incorporate mindfulness practice in your day-to-day routine structure of the school. So that's one. And another thing you were mentioning about that Om chanting and all. So I would like to clarify, like mindfulness is somehow different from meditation also. It's not, mindfulness is becoming more aware about what's happening in your surrounding environment and within you, bringing your awareness and attention in the present moment. And other component of being non-judgmental. Most of the time we are interpreting the situation, making lot of judgments about what we are doing, what we are supposed to do, what other people are doing it. So constantly there are judgments and interpretation happening around us. So mindfulness training helps us to being more non-judgmental, having more curious attitude, openness to whatever is happening in the present moment. And meditation is like you are sitting and doing focus on one particular thing, one centeredness.
How you will, you know, make a 2.5 or 3-year-old child understand what is that surroundings and the situation, the mindfulness?
So there are different ways to, you know, bring mindfulness. So one could be mindful listening, because at such a young age we start with sensory exploration, because these children learn from the sensories, right? So whatever if you see their curriculum also, it's more about sensory awareness, touch and, you know, walking. So we do mindful listening. We will ask them, okay, we will pay attention to different sounds, whatever you can hear right now. So we'll ask children, okay, can you hear the sound of fan, AC or something? Sometimes students are not even aware, okay, what I need to pay attention to, you know, what actually paying attention means. So you can lead them to, you know, okay, can you hear the sound of the fan? What else you can hear? They might tell you, okay, I can hear the sound of a traffic coming and all that. So that's how we can do mindful listening with the surrounding environment. And then we can bring mindful bell also. Teacher can create certain sound like tapping on the table and creating and asking the students to bring their attention to that. So that's how we bring mindful listening. Then there could be a mindful walking, with one step we will breathe in and other step we will breathe out, breathe in and breathe out. So that's how we can do. Paying attention to when you're walking. So how that touch feels when you are walking. So how when your feet are touching the ground, how it makes you feel. Is the temperature cool or warm? How you are feeling in that. So that's how.
That's exactly what I was talking about. I mean, with kindergarten, this what I can listen from her conversation. We can always club that physical education or the physical activities with that mindfulness. Similar things need to be developed for the senior classes as well.
So there are lot many activities very child friendly where you can, in a very simple way, you can bring mindfulness. So maybe sensory exploration with touch also. Mindful eating is also one of the way, a very effective way. So usually we are like feeding our children like watching TV or something, like just a task to complete the food, I think. And if we are helping them to taste it and how is it, and it make it more experiential, that's also give a very calming, soothing effect and also make the experience of enjoying the food.
So talking about mindful schools, or what a whole school approach would look like. I think, I mean, we've spoken about how it's possible to do these things with relative ease. So things are not as complicated as one might have feared. Having said that, I'm just conscious that every school is a bit different, isn't it? And so it's logical to assume that the kind of messaging, the kind of sort of information that is provided to the adults. So we're going to start with adults because adults can only work with adults, isn't it? Until they give them permission to work with children. So if a school wanted to, let's say, become a bit more mindful, could you think about what that might feel like? So, I mean, we've explored that it's going to be a journey, it's going to take some time. I think there is no lack of intention. So if you ask any school principal, would you like your school to be less stressful? Would you like your parents to be more emotionally competent and your children as well? Every school would say, yes, please. So the next question is going to be, okay, how do we take that journey? So I know that schools have very different preferences, and sometimes schools have a different focus. So some schools might take a lot of pride in the fact that they're only focusing on academics, and that's because the kind of people that they're talking to, that's what they think they want. So from your experience of having worked in different schools, can you think a little bit about how your school might change if in theory you went through this sort of a program?
See, one thing I firmly believe that the ultimate objective of life is to be happy, contented. And education is to prepare the students for life, live life happily and with content. Now, as we shared in the beginning that the schools have changed, the pressure from the parents, the intervention of the government, we need to design something which culminates or which syncs this mindfulness processes with the scholastic subjects, and it has to be a process, not at one shot. So we can always design 7 to 8 or 10 sessions, like we have the PTMs in the school. The same way these sessions designed differently for the kindergarten parents, for the parents of primary, for the parents of secondary and senior secondary students. And as PTM is a mandatory thing for the parents to attend, whether they do it or not, that's a secondary issue. Similarly, we can always have this mindfulness training or module for the teachers and the parents in the school. And of course, when I visualize a mindful school, is a happy school, is the school, a happy school will always perform better, be the academics, be the sports or anything.
Yes. I mean, there's some sort of science to this, and it's possible in theory to measure what's known as the psychological climate of a school.
Okay.
So, and essentially the psychological climate of a school is the sum total or the average of all the interactions that happen in a school. So the way teachers speak to students, the way students speak to each other, the way teachers speak to each other. And from what we spoke earlier, it sounds like schools are generally stressful places where there is some stress and there is some conflict. A lot of time, I mean, we've spoken a lot about time, haven't we? We've not really spoken about cost, but that's also a constraint. And there's very good research on this. The amount of time and cost that institutions are actually spending to maintain status quo. Is that okay? The amount of time and cost schools are incurring just to maintain things as they are, to not necessarily improve, is quite significant. Because academic decline in students or conflict between students or, God forbid, conflict between teachers. Okay. So the amount of, so there's a lot of emphasis on resources, and time is one of the main constraints that we hear about when we talk to school leaders. And of course, cost is a second concern. I don't think people realize that the amount of time and energy and cost that they're incurring to maintain things as they are. Because people don't realize that that the current system and the number of challenges that it comes with. So if there's a conflict, if two children have a fight, the amount of time that's going to be spent in resolving that conflict between the class, between the parents, if you think about it in terms of principal's time, I'm sure it won't happen in a few minutes of your time, isn't it? You'll need to take out a big chunk of your time for it. And if you can avoid one incident like that every day, then I think you have some time in your day. So there's a lot of research on at least cost, and there's some on time as well. And usually good quality positive psychology interventions are the sorts that deliver at least a 10-fold return on investment. So the idea would be that if you spend some time and some resources on training people, then you'd save a lot more, because you would avoid a number of the problems and you'd avoid a lot of academic issues, you'd avoid a lot of conflict and stress. So generally, whenever there's been research done on this, people have found that these sorts of interventions pay for themselves, both in time and cost.
That's brilliant, I think. And I think now we have realized that schools are keeping some funds for the training. So you can always, of course, with a lot more government intervention and all the other challenges, for bearing that cost for that is indeed a challenge. But of course, we can, once we see the result, once we showcase the result, once we put up these data and the researches, schools, they will welcome the program, and it is the need today.
As a parent, what do you think? What's your opinion? Like, because academics for parents are also quite important, and well-being of the child is also important. So how would you like to please?
So I may be part of the minority of the parent group who actually places well-being above academics. So first let me speak about myself. I definitely believe that my definition of happiness for my children is that they need to be content with life, they need to enjoy life, they need to be they really need to experience life and do it with a certain genuineness, and career success will follow if I give an environment to my child where they're not fearful, where they're not consumed with anxiety, they're not consumed with stress. What I've done is I've calmed the waters, and whatever is the worth of my child, the value of my child, that will rise up to the surface. In this desire to push that value up, we end up creating a lot of turmoil for our child. And I had progressive parents as well, so I never had any academic pressure put on me. All that was expected of me was that your job is to go to school to learn, ask the teacher questions, do the work that you're given, do it to the best of your ability. But there was never any talk of who came first, what was your rank, how much did you get, why did you get such low scores, why didn't you get higher scores. The orientation for me also growing up was do your best, and that's all that you can control. You can't control the results, and so to be stressed about the numbers and the marks which you have no control over is pointless. What you can control is the effort you're putting into it, and that effort, it cannot be forced. I mean, of course, Indian parents are fantastic at putting force, but if you just think about it, that if a child is bright, if you give them a happy, safe environment with boundaries, I'm not saying let children roam free and do whatever as they please. As a parent, we must set boundaries, set a routine, set discipline. But within that, if I am constantly putting pressure on that child, how are they going to perform at their best? So I think you were mentioning this earlier, that parents at their heart do have the best interest of the child, but sometimes it's just misguided. And I do see it amongst family and friends that bright children are doing well, but they are miserable. They are miserable, they have nothing else to show for their life except their academic achievements. And as a parent, I don't place premium on that. So for me, what I tell my children is, your job in school is to learn. What I've learned from my parents, I'm telling them as well. The other is to experience all the different activities that school has to offer. Don't worry. So my son plays the guitar, and he plays it well, and it's an actual subject on which they're scored in school. But for one of the years, he decided, I'd like to pick up the trumpet. And I was like, okay. I knew that he's not going to score well, so that was a trade-off, right? His scores would have dropped because he's now picking up a new instrument. But for me, it was more important that he's had an experience of something new and something different. And school is the safe space for them to enjoy all these different experiences. Once they're in the real world, they have to deal with so much else. And they'll get to know themselves, they'll get to discover what are their passions, what are their interests, what are their abilities. Unless a child tries his or her hand at music, how will they know whether that's a career that they could pursue? And today, thankfully, so many career options are available to our children. And I think as parents, that's the best we can do. Give them a safe space and let them experience everything that we can provide access to them for. And emotional well-being has to be actually a primary role of the parent. I think academics is where the school takes a greater role, and emotional well-being, in my opinion, is where parent takes the greater role, although both parties have to play a role together.
So for children, when we started our conversation also, we were talking about different stakeholders like school, teachers, parents, and all have this impact on the student or child's well-being or an overall growth of it. And even Dr. Kunal was mentioning that, about the emotional intelligence, and research also shows that, in our success, like what we called in our life success, 80% of emotional intelligent people who are who knows how to deal with the emotions, who knows how to manage their conflicting situations and take responsible decisions, are more successful as compared to academic achievers, students and all those things. So that's why it's very important in our school system or with parents or teacher to lay a foundation for well-being, for happiness and mindfulness in school system.